Hello, I'm Dr. Jonathan Liss, a board-certified neurologist from Columbus, Georgia at the Columbus Memory Center. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. We're going to talk today for a moment about Alzheimer's disease because the revolution is underway. We're also going to talk about the role of Columbus, Georgia in this worldwide revolution. And I think this talk that you're going to get today is going to make you feel better about the future. When we talk about Alzheimer's disease, when we talk about these chronic illnesses, I think everybody walks around with their head down, with a sour grin, and a feeling as though everything is hopeless. And I have to say, in many ways, that's how I was raised. I've been in this field for nearly 30 years, and when we look back, I started when there were no therapies imagined, and we didn't know even how to begin, frankly. And through the work of people that I've stood on their shoulders, we now have so many changes, so many ways in which to interdict this disease, and so much imagination on how we can do a better job that is a very bright future for the treatment and eventual cure of Alzheimer's disease. So let's move forward. As I mentioned, my name is Dr. Jonathan Liss. I'm a board-certified neurologist and a board-certified sleep specialist. I run the Columbus Memory Center, and we run a very busy research program in addition to a very busy neurology program. I sit on the board of advisors for Morehouse School of Medicine, and I teach as adjunct faculty for Columbus Regional Family Practice, as well as the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. So I got my hands kind of full. I always like to start with this little cartoon that my daughter wrote. I think it makes me look like a nicer person. It says, "Come in, one of the best neurologists in town." Of course, it's my daughter. At the time, she was about 6 or 7 years old, and now she's 26 and about to be married. And is speaking tonight. He will answer every question you have. His talks are not boring. He's so funny, you'll jump out of your seat. Of course, it is my daughter. She says, so let's please listen to Dr. Jonathan Liss. So that's a loving daughter, and she's still a loving, wonderful daughter. In any case, so let's start with some good news. The incidence of Alzheimer's disease, DAT, dementia of the Alzheimer's type, is actually declining. And you don't hear that in the news because there are so many cases of this illness. As the population is exploding with age, we're getting more cases. But if you look at the number per 100, that number is declining because we're doing a better job taking care of our brains. Everything that you can sort of imagine as heart healthy is brain healthy. So quitting smoking and taking care of blood pressure and better managing diabetes, eating better, losing a little bit of weight, exercising. What's happened with a revolution of exercise over these last decades is really paying off. We were reducing the number of dementia cases by about 1/3 overall. Alzheimer's disease is one of those dementia cases. And if we look at the history of Alzheimer's disease in particular, you're going to see a couple of slides in a row that are a little bit busy, but they give you a sense of where we've been and where we're coming, or where we're going to go. So in 1906, Dr. Alzheimer's made the first diagnosis. That's what gave us Alzheimer's disease. From 1907 to 1985, thousands of our parents and grandparents volunteered their bodies and or time to help understand the disease without any hope of benefit personally. In 1981 to 1992, our loved ones entered the first medication trials to impact the dementia of the Alzheimer's type, Alzheimer's disease. And in 1993, about 90 years of selfless sacrifice by our loved ones results in the first drug ever found to be successful for Alzheimer's disease. It was called Tacrid. Frankly, not a very good drug, but it gave us a sense that we could do something. It required too many laboratory draws and was too difficult really to take, so it really didn't hit the market hard, but it did make worldwide news because we knew we could now do something with our work. And then in 1994 to 2002, the march continued. 4 more drugs were discovered. In 2002 to 2010, we had an explosion in the understanding of the illness and the development of technology for its very early detection. We developed the concept of prodromal Alzheimer's disease. That means that we can now detect when people are going to get it, not when they actually have it. And if you can detect when they're going to have it, it gives you an opportunity to really go after the illness as early a stage. And so we have defined that prodromal Alzheimer's disease from 2011 to 2017, medication research trials to stop the conversion of mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's disease. And now they're still going. I shouldn't say 2017, they're still going on. And then in 2017, the prevention trials, the very first ever trials to see if we have the cure for Alzheimer's disease began. We're doing them right here in Columbus, Georgia. We're one of the first of 3 sites in the whole world to start these trials. So we will know in about roughly 8 years whether this is the cure of Alzheimer's disease in these FDA placebo-controlled double-blind trials. Really exciting time for this. So from now 2019 and forward, that we're hoping to change Alzheimer's disease from a calamity to a nuisance and eventually to a cure. So we're on our way. There's lots of good news to share. So what's the overall picture? really within the next 5 years, there's a realistic opportunity for more than a dozen, maybe even close to 2 dozen medications to actually come to the bedside. We've had our ups and we've had our downs. A year ago, well, let's use the year. In 2017, 2018, pardon me, that the first drug was ever shown to have a major impact on this disease. So it was a trial called BAN 2401, BAN 2401, and it showed that we could slow down the disease by at least 30%, and if you look at statistics slightly differently, up to 47%. A first disease-modifying possibility. We are repeating that trial, hoping to bring this drug to the bedside and make this big difference for people. We've also had lots of trip-ups. We've had lots of drugs that we thought had a good chance to work, and they failed. I'm sure you've read about some of those. One that was a big loss was called aducanumab. So now let's take a look a little bit at the disease itself. You're looking here at a picture of a healthy brain and an Alzheimer's brain. And what you can see is that there is a shrinkage. Now, every brain shrinks as it gets older, but with Alzheimer's disease, it shrinks more quickly. And so you're actually looking at brains of the same age, but you can see obviously that one is much smaller, almost like an orange that's past its time, and the other one is more full. And that's just a sign that this is actually a disease. And this next slide shows NFTs and amyloid. NFT stands for neurofibrillary tangle, and the amyloid plaques and tangles. That's the hallmark of this disease. That's the stuff that Dr. Alzheimer's was helped to figure out by diagnosing that patient, and later Dr. Terry with his pathologic work many years later figuring out some of these issues. So when we look at a brain with Alzheimer's disease, they have to have plaques and tangles. That's how we know the disease is there. So everybody asks, and I know some of you are asking right now, what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? Well, dementia is a category, just the same way that sports is a category. So if you were to look at a fit young person who looked like an athlete, and you were looking from a worldwide perspective, you'd say, what's the most likely sport, organized sport this person could be involved in? You'd probably say soccer, right? So if we look at dementias, and you said, gosh, here's an older person with gradual loss of memory, and they seem to be demented, what's the most common dementia? That would be Alzheimer's disease. So everybody with Alzheimer's disease has dementia, but not everybody with dementia has Alzheimer's disease. As another example, we all unfortunately have known that 14-year-old boy or 16-year-old boy who got in a car accident or a skateboarding accident or whatnot and was never the same. So that young man unfortunately became demented at the time that his head was impacted so hard. It won't get worse, that's the way he is, but he's demented. So that's one of the dementias out of a big category. But 2/3 to 3/4 of all the dementias are Alzheimer's disease. That's how common it is. And if we look at this particular graph, you'll see that in this one it shows 2/3 of the dementias are Alzheimer's disease. You can find different graphs with slightly different numbers, but stroke produces some, Parkinson's disease some, combinations of diseases some. There are things called frontal temporal dementias. There are issues related to multiple sclerosis. So there's lots of different ways in which the brain can be injured, and any of them, frankly, can lead to dementia. But there are they're far fewer than Alzheimer's disease. This next graph is one that's very helpful. It was done by a colleague of mine and a former mentor of mine named Dr. Doug Glasgow out of the University of California, San Diego. And so he put together, you're looking at common everyday tasks and how people do with their tasks. And what you see on the left side, where it says keeping appointments, it means that on the far side of the bar, on the far left side of the bar, that about 3/4 of the people can do that task. And on the far right side of the bar, where it's a little less yellow and a little more golden, it's about 1 in 4 people can do that particular task. And then at the top you can see mild, moderate, and severe disease. At the bottom it's too little for you to see, the numbers are too small. But you'll see that there's a scale, and this is related to a very common memory test that you may have taken before, called the Mini Mental Status Examination. This is the scale that is used in most doctors' offices and used in most research trials as sort of an entryway. Is the person perfectly fine, or is the person not perfectly fine? And when we find a person with this illness, that we try and get a sense of where they are so that we can help them understand what they're likely to do well, what likely might be a trip up for them, and help their families understand this as well. Because the worst thing that can happen are surprises. And as we'll talk about a little later, that we need to do a better job making diagnoses, facing diagnoses, because there's a lot to do. There is a lot to do. Sometimes people say, well, gosh, the medications out there are not that great. And I would say right now that's true. The medications are not that great. But you would also say the same thing for 1,000 other diseases. Let's just take a terrible fracture of a leg. Would we say, gosh, that's a terrible fracture of the leg, the surgeon can't put it back together quite right, the person's never going to run. So Are we helpless? No, we're not helpless. We have all kinds of tools to make the person walk better or move better. We have all kinds of medicines that give them less pain. We've got all kinds of lessons for the family in the house on how they can make the lifestyle a little easier so the person can be fully independent. And that's the same thing we have with memory loss and Alzheimer's disease. There's a million different ways in which to keep a person independent. Our goal is to make certain a person stays independent. That is exactly the same goal as the person that comes to see us. And I'm sure it's the goal of everybody watching this video. So then we break down, after prodromal Alzheimer's disease, prodromal Alzheimer's disease also is called mild cognitive impairment secondary to prodromal Alzheimer's disease, and that's what you're seeing with this slide. And so with this, people have very subtle memory loss or cognitive problems. They kind of have a sense that there's a problem. Their family might have a slight sense of a problem, but nobody's really certain about it. So they have not developed Alzheimer's disease. They remain fully functional. These are the folks that we really, really want to find, because these are the people most likely to be able to take advantage of all of our crutches, all of the ways in which to keep people independent. So it makes sense to face this illness rather than run away from it. The farther you run from it, the later it is that we find it, and the less we can do to help you. That's the bottom line, and that's true of probably most diseases. We should look at prevention options. So better overall health, meaning control blood pressure, treat the diabetes aggressively, quit smoking, some exercise and weight control. We believe that a brisk 20-minute walk 3 times per week is very helpful for Alzheimer's disease to prevent it. And so brisk means getting your heart rate up to about 2/3 its maximum. Talk to your doctor, make sure it's safe. Other things like controlling your cholesterol, limiting your alcohol take. Doesn't mean zero, but limiting to a glass of wine or so a day would be great. And having adequate sleep. We need to have adequate sleep. And for all of you out there that are having insomnia, it's not a question of taking medicine to sleep better, because taking medicine puts you unconscious, but it doesn't actually create sleep really. And so you have to learn better sleep strategies, taking the TV out of the bedroom, getting the dogs out of the bed. I know that never going to happen. But making a bedroom that's dark, quiet, and comfortable, a good place to sleep that's conducive. So those of you that suffer from insomnia, and there's plenty of you out there, I know, that you should get a self-help book or booklet on insomnia. There's 1,000 behavioral changes that you can make to do things better. Then we look at non-medication treatment options. Things like puzzles, doing Sudoku and crossword, things that exercise your mind. The mantra that we have around here is become smarter tomorrow than you are today. And that goes for any age, any level of education. It's never too late to get educated. I have a personal passion for history. So every day I read a little history. So I always know tomorrow I'm going to be smarter than I am today, because it's a passion of mine. I love to read it, I love to talk about it. And I wouldn't like you to find one of your passions. And if you don't have a passion, if it's too hard to find, then just start doing a puzzle. Do one even something that should be interesting. It doesn't have to be a passion, but anything that would challenge you, and put away all those word searches. Word searching is not a puzzle. It's too simple. A 4-year-old can do it. It's got to be something that you have to struggle over a little bit, but something you can accomplish. I wouldn't want you to do a Rubik's Cube unless you're really good at it, because most of us would play around with it for 5 or 10 minutes and then put it down. Something you can accomplish within about an hour without too much frustration, but enough frustration to make you think, okay? So if we look at medications, currently there are only 4. 3 are in the same category. One is called Aricept, one is called Razidine, the other one is called Exelon. So people with early Alzheimer's disease or Alzheimer's disease at all should be on one of those 3 typically. And then as the disease is far along, then they would have a drug called Memantine or Namenda added. It's been shown not to be helpful in people with early disease. And as I take away as much as I put on, because so many people are put on early, it's been shown not to help early folks. All right, we look at possible treatment options. Everybody always asks about things like vitamin E and ginkgo biloba and ibuprofen and estrogen, Sulfonate and numerous others. The only one that has any real evidence that's been consistent so far is megadose vitamin E. But vitamin E increases the risk of bleeding, and it's only been shown to help people who have the disease and who are already taking a drug called Aricept. So it shouldn't just be taken willy-nilly, especially since it has to be a big dose, and especially since vitamin E can cause bleeding as side effects. Nothing is free. And then everybody always asks her, I see a hand out there right now that's asking about Prevagen, because they're constantly advertising it. We have a special policy here at the Columbus Memory Center, and I'm willing to extend it to you today, regardless of where in the world you're watching this video. And so for $10 a month, we'll send you a letter not to buy Prevagen, and that way you'll save probably $30 or $40 per month. We'll make 10. Deal? Probably not. Stop buying the Prevagen. At the bottom of that commercial, in the little white writing that you can't read, you have to freeze it, and then you have to look really carefully. It talks about the fact that they can't make any claims about this. They've never really tested it, despite what they say with their words. They really try and trick you with their words. And then a lot of people ask about Lumosity. Lumosity is an online puzzle service. Nothing wrong with Lumosity. In other words, it's helpful, but we know that it's not as good as social interaction. So going to a book club, going to a church group and having a discussion about the Bible, going anywhere where you're interacting with society is actually as good or better than Lumosity. So on one hand, Lumosity, nothing wrong with it, but you shouldn't have to spend your money on it. You should go out and get into society. We think that's better. So how about a little more good news? So we can now detect this disease so much earlier. We can look in the brain with very specialized what we call PET scans. There's different kinds of PET scans, but the ones that are currently only approved for research, we can look several years into the future and know if somebody's going to get it. That's part of the way in which we choose patients for these research trials when we're trying to keep them from developing the disease. We can also check spinal fluid with a lumbar puncture and tell as well. They're looking at, in research areas right now, issues of your retina, looking at your eye, checking your stool, checking your sense of smell. And there are ways and strong clues that we will likely have tests for each of these areas so that we'll be able to detect it really early in those ways. So how does Columbus, Georgia fit in? Columbus, Georgia, a town of, 250,000. How did it make its mark? Well, Columbus, Georgia has done a lot. So first of all, we have numerous FDA-approved research trials. Right now, at the moment, I think we have about 20. It varies from month to month and year to year because some complete and some are starting. We partner all over the world. We've got trials with, of course, the United States, Denmark, Germany, Japan, Canada, South Korea, other countries as well. So we're well sought after. There's not an actual ranking of sites, but based on the fact that we typically have number 1, 2, or 3 most patients in the world, we feel we probably rank number 3 in the world in clinical Alzheimer's care. You think, gosh, how's that possible? It means, yes, it means that we beat Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins and Emory and UAB and you choose the famous university. And it's not because we're smarter, we're not. It's not because we work harder, although we do work harder. It's because when people go to these universities, they usually have 15 different illnesses for which they have to fight. And when we're looking at research trials, we are trying to find patients that have a disease, whatever the disease is, trying to cure that disease. And so if they have renal failure, kidney failure, or lung problems, we don't usually enroll them because if their lungs got better, then we wouldn't know if it was the drug that made them better or their lungs got better. Or frankly, if they died, we would know if it was because of the disease, the drug, or because their lungs failed on their own. So we try and get sort of, quote unquote, the virgins. And it's very hard for these universities to find those folks. So that's why we tend to beat them. So let me also say that Columbus is the first city in the world to create a public-private partnership. So the Columbus Memory Center, combined with the Mayor of Columbus and the City Council of Columbus and the Alzheimer's Association of Columbus, in an effort to screen every senior their cognition for free every year. This has never been done before. It sounds so simple, but it hasn't. And we call this the Columbus Memory Project. We've gained worldwide attention because of this. We were featured on WebMD for an entire week on the front page. We've been called from all around the world asking us, how's it going? Because if we can teach people to start measuring their brain function every year, we will have taken a giant step forward in the prevention and treatment of memory loss well before it becomes a problem for people, keeping people independent, keeping people healthy. So Columbus was the first one to ever do that. And we invented what's called the memory number, the first ever vital sign for brain health. We're very proud of this because we need people to be able to communicate with each other. Just as, learning blood pressure is now very obvious. Your grandson might ask you what your blood pressure is, or your cholesterol, or your pulse. People seem to know this, secondhand. And what we want that to be is also for cognitive health. So we've coined the phrase the memory number. We have a validated test that takes somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes to complete. It's self-administered. We offer it for free. And for those of you in the region, stop by anytime. You don't need an appointment. You won't get a doctor out of it. And basically, you will get your test results in 2 or 3 weeks, and you'll know where you stand. And what we find, this is really amazing, is that most of the people that don't have a perfectly good score have completely correctable reasons why they're not thinking as well as they should. And so think of the tragedy of people not going after that. We find that people have depression, anxiety, medication side effects, sleep apnea, sleep disorders, pain syndromes. You choose it. And if we can go after those things, then these people that are thinking not as sharply as they should start becoming more and more sharp. Every once in a while, we do pick up a case of early on Alzheimer's disease, or sometimes not even early. But most of the time, it's not that. Most of the time, we're finding that a person is well, and then we can document they're well, and so they can use that as a baseline and check it year to year to year to year. And so if they ever start to decline, that person would be the very first person to know it. It's a wonderful thing, really. So that was first in the world. First in the world for a vital sign, first in the world for a partnership between the city government, Alzheimer's Association, and ourselves. You're seeing a couple of pictures right now of Mayor Tomlinson, who helped us launch this, and some of the recognition that we got. We've also created I wrote a self-help booklet called Living Well, and we give this out for free all over Georgia and frankly other places in the United States as well, but mostly in Georgia, so that people can learn about memory loss and benefit from the little bit of wisdom I tried to put in. It's a very short booklet. We created a puzzle to remind people to do puzzles, do something to exercise the mind. So why is the Columbus Memory Project important? Let's look at 6 big reasons. So with better brain health, we're already preventing and delaying Alzheimer's disease and preventing many dementias. That's what I said to begin with, that the number of dementias per 100 is going down. The Columbus Memory Project will reduce the number of new cases in the Columbus, Phoenix City area and slow its progression by teaching better brain health. So the reality is this region should have the healthiest brains in the world after we get really motivated and going. Independence. Early intervention offers the best chance to maintain independence. By making the memory number the next vital sign for senior citizens, early detection of cognitive decline will be commonplace and independence maximized. Improved care. All right, this is a sad one. Nationally, only 50% of Alzheimer's patients have a diagnosis, okay? Only 50%. Of the 50% that don't have a diagnosis, half is because the healthcare provider does not know how to make the diagnosis, and half is because the healthcare provider doesn't want to tell the patient bad news. Both those are terrible answers. And I think that comes from the fact that we've had very little to offer over these decades. We're getting there. We're really getting there. We're going to have to change teaching in schools, and we're going to have to change in medical schools, and we're going to have to change the paradigm for primary care doctors so they go after it as strongly as the Columbus Memory Center is going after it. Because when we can get it early, we can maintain independence and also prepare the family to do a better job helping their loved one. All right, another kind of shameful statistic. The Alzheimer's Association finds that only 12% of Alzheimer's families ever contact the Alzheimer's Association, an organization that just does good work. I don't think they've ever had a scandal. Everything they offer is completely free. They're very kind. Columbus, Georgia is blessed to have an incredible local chapter. I'm sure there's many of these great chapters all over the United States. So help families get in touch with the Alzheimer's Association. There's 100 different things that they can do to help a family cope with this illness, to help a patient stay independent. Let's take advantage of their skills. Research. So as I mentioned, there's a number of potential medications that have a chance to come to the market over the next 5 years. The more quickly we enroll patients in these research trials, the more quickly either we have a drug that helps us more, or we clear the drug from the decks and go on to the next drug. So by getting the entire community aware of what we offer and getting them involved with the Columbus Memory Project, that Columbus will be at the forefront, it always is, in research enrollment, and therefore stamp out this disease more quickly because of our good hard work. So what does research do? Research, you gain an immediate sense of hope, okay? You obtain access to cutting-edge research therapies. Remember that research never replaces proven therapies, so we always give you proven therapies, and then when you are set and stable, we offer you the opportunities of research accord, and if you decide you want to take part, then we welcome you in. Your memory problem becomes the focus of an entire healthcare team. You help find treatments and cures for yourself and your children. In the old days, I'd just say we're helping you for your children. Now it's for yourself and your children. And your participation in research will assure that people of your ethnic and racial background are represented in the final results. We need to have every ethnic group participate. Otherwise, when we have drugs that come to market, we'll only assume that they're making a difference for people. And so finally, let me show you I think a wow slide. So right here, you're looking at that very specialized PET scan that measures amyloid in the brain, whether a person has Alzheimer's disease or on the way to Alzheimer's disease. And what you're looking at with this slide, the red is amyloid. And this is at baseline, before we gave anybody any medications, okay? And the next slide you're going to see at the top, you're going to see a collection of those individuals. That's what they look like. And then as you come down to the lower 3 brains, you're looking at low dose, medium dose, and high dose medication to see if we could clear amyloid from the brain. This is what I call a wow slide, because look at that. Even the top one is great, but the second from the top, I should say. But the bottom one almost has no amyloid left in it. So as we work to do this, and that's what that BAN 2401 trial does, as we work to do this, we are clearing the brain of this amyloid, hopefully making a difference for everybody, hopefully stamping out this disease. I thank you for joining me today, and I want you to go out with a smile and recognize that 1,000 things are being done constantly. There's not a second in a day and not a day in a year when researchers around the world are not working on this issue. And with your help, we will have a cure not just in the future, but in our lifetimes. I'm expecting to have a massive impact on this disease in my practice lifetime. And I don't have that many years left. So we're on our way. I wish you a great day.